Most people spend their entire lives reacting. They react to people who hurt them. They react to circumstances that overwhelm them. They react to a world that was never designed with their interests in mind. And in all that reacting, they never stop long enough to ask the single question that could unravel everything. Why does my life keep producing the same problems? The answer is not bad luck. It is not the economy, your past, or the people around you. What follows is not motivation. It is not encouragement. It is something far more useful and far more unsettling. It is clarity. Lesson 1. You are solving the wrong problems. You have been solving the wrong problems. Every single time you have felt stuck, overwhelmed, or defeated, there was likely a simpler, deeper issue underneath the one you were trying to fix. And the reason you never found it is because the human mind is not designed to seek truth. It is designed to seek comfort. And comfort, more often than not, is the most sophisticated enemy of progress you will ever face. Schopenhauer understood something about human beings that most people refuse to admit. He believed that the will, that blind, restless, insatiable drive that lives inside every person, does not want resolution. It wants continuation. It wants to keep striving, keep suffering, keep desiring. Because the moment desire is satisfied, a new desire immediately rises to take its place. You are not trying to solve your problems. You are cycling through them. And the cycle continues because you have never identified the root. Think about the last major problem in your life. The one that kept returning no matter how many times you thought you had handled it. Now think deeper. Was the problem really what it appeared to be on the surface? Or was it a symptom of something you have never been willing to confront directly? A pattern of avoidance, a refusal to accept a truth, a way of relating to other people that produces the same outcome dressed in different circumstances. Here is the dangerous part. Most people feel productive when they are solving problems. The act of solving creates the sensation of progress. But if you are solving symptoms instead of causes, you are not moving forward. You are spinning. And the world will keep sending you the same lesson in different packaging until the day you finally decide to read it. Stop addressing the visible and begin examining the invisible. When something goes wrong, do not immediately reach for a solution. Reach first for understanding. Sit with the discomfort long enough to ask where this actually comes from. Not where it appears to come from. Where it actually originates. In your beliefs, in your patterns, in the decisions you made about yourself and the world years ago that you have never revisited. Carl Jung spent decades studying the parts of the human psyche that people refuse to look at. He called it the shadow, the collection of traits, impulses, and truths that are too uncomfortable to be acknowledged in conscious awareness, so they are buried. But buried things do not disappear. They gain power in darkness. They begin to operate beneath the surface of your behavior, shaping your decisions without your awareness, attracting situations that mirror your unresolved interior. The moment you understand this, everything changes. Your problems are not random. They are reflections. They are your inner architecture projected outward onto the world. And the person who learns to read those reflections, who learns to look at their recurring failures and ask, what am I not seeing about myself? That person has just acquired a power that the majority of the population will never access. And here is what makes this even more disorienting. The problems you keep returning to often feel different each time. Different people involved, different contexts, different surface details, but the emotional signature is identical. The same tightness in the chest, the same sense of betrayal, the same feeling of being cornered with no way out. That repetition is not coincidence, it is instruction. The universe does not punish randomly. It reflects precisely. And what it is reflecting back at you, every single time, is the unexamined assumption that is driving your behavior beneath the level of conscious awareness. Most people never reach this layer. They remain at the surface, managing consequences, adjusting tactics, changing environments, without ever asking the one question that would make all of that unnecessary. The question is not what happened to me. The question is what inside me keeps recreating this. Fix the root. Let the symptoms dissolve on their own. That is not optimism. That is the most ruthlessly practical approach to human experience that exists. Lesson 2. You are bleeding energy into things you cannot control. You care too much about what cannot be controlled and too little about what can. This is not a new observation. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it from a palace while managing an empire on the edge of collapse. The Stoics built an entire philosophy around this single distinction, and yet, generation after generation, the same mistake continues. People pour the majority of their psychological energy into outcomes, into other people's opinions, into events that are entirely outside their domain of influence, and they are left perpetually exhausted, perpetually resentful, and perpetually confused about why their efforts produce so little return. Here is what is actually happening beneath the surface of that dynamic. When you invest emotional energy in things you cannot control, you are not simply wasting resources. You are training your mind to feel powerless. Every moment you spend in anxiety about an outcome you cannot determine is a moment in which your nervous system is rehearsing helplessness. And the mind that rehearses helplessness long enough begins to believe that is its natural state. The Stoic distinction is not merely philosophical. It is neurological. It is strategic. The man who has learned to clearly identify the boundary between what is his and what is not, between what lies within his will and what lies outside it. That man cannot be manipulated through fear. He cannot be destabilized through uncertainty, because his sense of stability is not built on conditions that can be taken from him. It is built on something interior, something permanent, something that no circumstance and no other person has the power to revoke. And here is the dangerous part that most people never consider. People who understand this principle about you, people who understand that you have not made this distinction, will use it. Manipulative individuals, institutions, social systems, they all operate on the same mechanism. Create the impression that something you value is at risk, and you will comply. Create the impression that approval can be withdrawn, that security is conditional, that belonging depends on behavior, and you will reshape yourself accordingly. The lever of control is always the thing you care about losing. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every social pressure, every guilt-inducing relationship dynamic, every system designed to keep you in a state of seeking, all of it operates through your investment in uncontrollable outcomes. The moment you withdraw that investment, the mechanism fails. Not because the world changes, because you do. This is not detachment in the passive, withdrawn sense that most people imagine when they hear the word. This is strategic sovereignty. It is the active, deliberate choice to concentrate your energy exclusively in the domain where it has actual power. Your thoughts, your responses, your discipline, your standards, your direction. These are yours. Everything else is weather. And a man who has learned to walk through any weather without being stopped by it is not someone the world can easily defeat. Sun Tzu wrote that every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought. The preparation, the positioning, the internal clarity, that is where victory lives. Not in the moment of conflict, but in the quality of the mind that enters it. And the mind that has trained itself to release what it cannot govern, that mind enters every conflict already ahead. Consider how much of your daily mental energy is consumed by things that will resolve themselves regardless of your anxiety, or will not resolve regardless of how much you worry. Other people's decisions, the passage of time, consequences already set in motion, opinions already formed. You cannot reach back and change them. You cannot force the outcome you want through sheer emotional investment. And yet, the energy keeps flowing in that direction because the mind mistakes intensity of feeling for influence over reality. It does not work that way. Feeling something deeply does not move it. Only action within your actual domain of power moves anything. Redirect your energy inward. Build something there that cannot be shaken from outside. Develop a relationship with your own discipline that is more reliable than any external source of validation you have ever chased. And watch how differently the world begins to respond to a person who has stopped needing it to behave a certain way. Lesson 3. The identity you are defending is the cage. The identity you are defending is the very thing that is keeping you trapped. This is perhaps the most psychologically confrontational truth of the three, and it is also the most transformative. Most people believe they have a self that must be protected, maintained, and consistently presented to the world. They believe that to change is to lose something. They believe that admitting error is a form of weakness. They believe that the story they have been telling about who they are must be kept intact. And that belief, quiet, invisible, disguised as self-respect, is the cage they have built around their own potential. Nietzsche's concept of self-overcoming was not about self-improvement in the conventional sense. It was not about adding skills or acquiring achievements. It was about the willingness to destroy previous versions of yourself when they no longer serve the direction you are moving. The higher individual is not someone who has arrived at a fixed point of excellence. It is someone who is perpetually willing to sacrifice the comfortable, familiar self for the sake of something greater. The person who cannot do this is not protecting themselves. They are preserving their own limitation. Think about the beliefs you carry about yourself that you have never examined. I am not someone who is capable of that. This is just how I am. I have always been this way. These statements feel like self-knowledge. They are not. They are the sediment of past experiences, past feedback, past failures that have been calcified into identity. And once something becomes identity, the mind will do almost anything to preserve it, even self-sabotage, even unconsciously avoiding success, because success would require becoming someone whose profile does not match the internal story. This is where people lose power without ever understanding why. They set goals, but their identity quietly undermines the pursuit. They want different results, but they are committed to remaining the same person. The gap between who they believe they are and who they would need to become in order to achieve what they want. That gap is never confronted directly. It is avoided through distraction, through blame, through the comfortable narrative that the obstacle is external. Here is the mechanism you must understand. Identity defense is invisible. It does not announce itself as fear or resistance. It disguises itself as logic, as practicality, as humility. The voice that says, "I am being realistic," is often the voice of an identity that refuses to be challenged. The voice that says, "I know myself," is often the voice of a person who has confused familiarity with truth. Most people never realize this. They spend decades interpreting the world through a self-concept that was largely constructed in childhood, in conditions of limited information and limited power, and they mistake that construction for permanent reality. The moment you are willing to ask, not what is wrong with my circumstances, but what is wrong with the version of me that keeps producing these circumstances, that is the moment the architecture begins to shift. Not through force, not through dramatic reinvention, through inquiry, through the willingness to sit with an uncomfortable question and not immediately reach for a comfortable answer. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful individuals are those who are not bound by sentiment about their own position. The prince who can look at his kingdom without attachment, who can make the cold assessment of what is working and what is not, who can sacrifice a familiar approach for a more effective one. That individual is the one who survives and advances. Apply that same ruthlessness not to other people, but to your own identity. Be willing to see yourself clearly. Be willing to find what needs to be removed. And understand this final dimension of the trap. The older the identity, the more invisible it becomes. The beliefs you formed earliest about who you are and what you deserve and what is possible for someone like you. Those beliefs do not feel like beliefs anymore. They feel like facts. They feel like the texture of reality itself. That is precisely what makes them so dangerous. You do not argue with facts. You do not question the air you breathe. And so the deepest limitations go completely unchallenged, not because you lack the intelligence to see them, but because they have become so familiar that they no longer register as something that could be different. The world does not reward the person you have always been. It rewards the person you are becoming. And becoming requires the courage to stop defending the past. 3 lessons, not 300. 3. And beneath the surface of almost every recurring problem, every persistent failure, every feeling of being stuck, you will find one of these 3 operating. A root that was never addressed. An uncontrollable outcome that absorbed all available energy. An identity that quietly resisted transformation. The philosopher does not offer you comfort. The strategist does not offer you reassurance. What they offer is something far more valuable. An accurate map of the territory. A clear view of how human beings actually function beneath the stories they tell themselves. Most people will hear these ideas and feel moved for a moment, and then return to the same patterns before the day is over. That is the nature of insight without integration. Information without application is indistinguishable from ignorance. The question is never whether you understood something. The question is whether you were changed by it. You came here for a reason. Something in your life is not working the way it should, and now you have, in precise and unambiguous terms, a framework for understanding why. What you do with that framework is the only thing that matters from this point forward. The lesson has been given. The next move belongs entirely to you.